Whether you're recording at home or in a hotel room or in a recording studio, try and create the best environment that you can to record. Don't just stick the laptop on the table and make it work. I mean, take this interview, for example. We've moved the microphone just a few inches to make my voice as clear as possible. That makes a huge difference. Little tiny things. It's all in the detail. Well, I think one of my top tips for home recording is forget that you're in a home. Try and make that home sound disappear. Because one of the giveaways on a lot of vocals particularly, and if you're doing everything with loops and beats and it's going directly into your laptop, then the room isn't playing any part of the sound recording. So that problem doesn't exist. But for those that want to add, say, an acoustic guitar, a vocal or some harmonies, and especially when you add multiple vocals, the sound of the room can be quite disarming. So one of the simplest things, when you use the phrase bedroom recorders, what do you have in your bedroom? You have, in most cases, a duvet and some pillows, unless you're sleeping on the floor. But even if you're sleeping on the floor, you've got some duvets and some pillows. Well, a duvet is a fantastic sound absorber. If you hang your duvet up perpendicular to one of the sides, you can create a vocal booth. Put the microphone into the duvet and sing into the duvet. Immediately you will absorb the ping. Now this room's quite well soundproof, so it's not that bad. But if this was a bedroom, it would go ping, ping, ping. Try not put your guitar or your vocals right against the window, which will reflect back. And again, cheapens the sound and gives the recording a demo quality in a negative way. I'm all for organic recording, and sometimes you can capture some magic, but try and make it sound as professional as possible, and the microphone will pick up literally anything. So make sure that the space that you're in is as dry as possible for the purposes of your demos. It'll make them sound a lot better, especially if you multi-track. Well, if you're recording a full band and treating the room is difficult, again, you can make certain creative judgments. So for example, if you're a drum, bass and guitar band, consider not necessarily miking the cabinets of the guitar and keep the volume quite low if possible. There's lots of various boxes available that will allow you to run the amplifier at a quieter volume but still give you the crunch as if it's running on 11. But if a room is full of amps on 3 rather than 11, that won't bleed onto the drum mics, and so you'll have a little bit more control over it. There are plugins available in post-production to remove some of the reverb that you might have accidentally recorded, but I think the key, certainly with capturing a band, is to capture the performance. And if there's a certain way that you can set the band up to minimize too much reflection in the room, that will help the recording to be as tight as possible. So try and keep the mics to a minimum, because if you've got 100 mics, they're going to pick up everything. And often, it is fair to say, using the analogy of the older recordings, many of those old recordings were made with half a dozen mics at most, a couple on the drums, if anything, and one for vocals. So if you're trying to capture a band, try and capture the performance and look at how it sounds. Maybe you could capture the whole thing with 2 or 3 microphones, and that might sound better than multi-miking it and having loads of noise and hum. And hum is also, as we're mentioning, hum. When you're recording in a house, if you've got fridges, washing machines and things like that, they really do interfere with the power. So if at all possible, try and separate your electrics. So therefore, the things like your mixing console, your guitar amps, try and put them on a different circuit if possible, or indeed buy a separate isolating transformer, or there's plenty of power strips available that isolate a little bit. That'll make a huge difference, because, for example, if the fridge switches on during the middle of a recording, it'll almost certainly put a click on your recording. And dishwashers and things like that tend to put like low hum on everything, because they're very high current draining items, and they will, interfere with the recording. There are many ways of doing it. One of the simplest, especially if you only have a laptop at your disposal, utilize the stereo. So record the guitar on one side record the vocal on the other side. So in a stereo recording, you've effectively got two mono channels. It's how they used to do it in the olden days. And then mix that to mono. Don't leave the vocal on one side and the guitar on the other. But it means that using the pan control, you've got a little bit of control of the balance, guitar versus vocal. That's really simple. So a stereo file, guitar one side, vocal on the other. If you're lucky enough to have a guitar that's got a pickup on it, then utilize the pickup, because then that won't have vocal bleeding onto it, and there'll be a small amount of acoustic guitar bleed on your vocal mic. I think it's better to capture a performance than overdub the vocal at that early stage. If, on the other hand, you can't play guitar and sing at the same time, then you're going to have to look at a time bass. So you might have to do it to click unless you're really, really clever at playing. So put down a click, work out your time signatures, and with most laptops today, you don't have to have a fixed tempo. So if you want your verse at, I don't know, 100 BPM and the chorus needs to be at 110, then you can do a tempo map first, work out exactly where the bars are and what tempo you want. And then another little trick there would be, if you're a pretty good singer, put down a very quick guide vocal against that click. So just play a chord and just put a guide vocal. So now when you're listening back, you're hearing click and guide vocal, and you can do your guitar properly. So you don't even need to sing the whole song. You just go verse, da, 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 da. Play the guitar, get a good guitar take, and then overdub your vocal to that. Then you'll have clean guitar and clean vocal, should you want that. But honestly, for a demo, just acoustic guitar and vocal live, or a guitar amp, very, very quiet, and vocal live, that sounds fantastic, but it gets the song across. A laptop is great if you've got one. So if you happen to have one and you're using it for word processing or editing videos or doing a picture library and it's not doing anything, then get yourself a couple of mics, a USB mic or something, and you can record. There's so much free software around that will allow you to get a recording in it. But a hardware recorder, a dedicated hardware recorder, does have a lot of additional facilities. One of the best things about dedicated hardware recorders is this terrible thing called latency, that if you record on a cheap laptop, there's a few milliseconds of time delay between the input and the output, and that can be incredibly off-putting, whereas a hardware device can compensate for that. And generally speaking, what happens is the microphone input and the headphone output are linked together and the recording is separate, so that you hear the live input and your headphones are all in sync. So depending on how fussy you are, that can actually be quite a negative if you hear latency. So a dedicated hardware recorder is very good, and those are so inexpensive, especially if you go down the route of having a tape-based one, because no one wants them anymore. And there's nothing wrong with it. Some of my best demos have been done on a Porter Studio, which is a cassette in a 4-track recorder, and you can pick those up for nothing. And if you just get the idea down, don't get too hung up on technology. I mean, my advice really is to work with a producer at the earliest possible stage, because together you can go on that journey of crafting the song. And there are so many young producers out there that are desperate to find the right band to work with. So my advice to both parties is, if you're a young producer or an engineer, go to a lot of gigs, and if you see a band that you like, even if it's a tiny little pub gig, go up to the band and say, I really love what you're doing. Would you like me to help with the sound? Would you like me to help record you? Most bands are rehearsing somewhere, and even if you go to their rehearsal space and record and help them with that, I guarantee that they'll get better results. So for me, I like to be in the project as early as possible, because I think together you go on that journey. If the band have recording facilities or a great demo place that they can rehearse and record, then capture the best version of what you think you want to play to somebody, and then again work with the producer. And it's fair to say that the traditional route of band doing demos, band getting signed to record company hiring producer, those days are pretty much gone. The best way now is for the band and the producer to work together, create a great record, and then separately or jointly go to an independent label or a major label, and if that's the route they want to take, and then see about getting a release that way. But actually most bands these days don't really want that. They want to just work with a producer, make a great record and put it out themselves, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Who knows where the money's going to come? It might come from airplay, it might come from a sync license, it might come from somebody using it on, you know, a commercial, or it might be used in a corporate event. Who knows? You know, with YouTube and Spotify and all those various outlets, it's amazing who can hear your music and they might think, well, actually, I really like that. And therefore, if you're the owners of your sound recording and your songs together as a team, a little business, you can go and sell that product on or or get some money to go to the next stage.